says, once Mongo's running,
Yeah, she wants spaces, she wants ampersand, MBSP. Yeah.
Okay. And then so and then ready.
read what you could.
This one? Oh, yeah.
You could just put a space.
Yay, one record. That's all I need. Well,
Yeah. Okay, so folks, on the Canvas site, we now have a discussion topic called useful Linux commands. When you find one you think is useful, add it there. Thanks.
Evan.
Seems to be our local expert. We now have a how do you empty your trash can. And we may have to worry about trash cans because our virtual machine is only 2 gig and we've already loaded a bunch of stuff. Anyhow, this other article, which I put up there, is installing Node, blah, blah, blah. This is the document we were just looking at. And hopefully you got to the point where it said Mongo was running. Then you need to do this because it won't let you restart it if it isn't starting. So you want to type sudo service mongo d, which stands for Mongo daemon stop. You should all do that. Are you doing that? You got him stop and then restart it, or you've already passed? We stop it.
Yeah.
Then we're going to start it, and we're going to tell it what database to use. So you're going to enter this, and you can cut and paste this if you have this document open. Sudo Mongo, you're saying start it up, and then you're saying where is the database? What's the path for database? So it's MongoD space, and then 2 dashes for a parameter, and then a space, and then /home/bc user node test1 data.db. And you have to have that directory has to exist. You have to have created a data in DB. That will again restart Mongo, but it's looking at a particular database, which is technically empty right now. Okay, and then if it says, I'm listening at 27017, you're good. Okay, now we're going to put in 3 records, and we need these records for your other code to make sense. In order to do this, you may have to navigate to wherever you put Mongo to work. But those of you that did the one that I just did, that installation created a global path, and you can just type Mongo. So, what I want you to do now, if your database is up and running, and you've typed that word Mongo, and when you type that word Mongo, if it works, you're lucky. If it doesn't, you have to go to the /mongo/bind directory and type Mongo. That is like SQL Server Management Studio, very loosely. You're starting a utility that lets you play with your Mongo database, which is also running. And when you get there, you have to tell it also, you started the database and pointed it at a database. That's just like starting up SQL Server. And now you're opening SQL Server Management Studio and you're saying, I want you to go look at node test, which is the name of our database. And then this is a command to that Mongo utility. DB is the name of the database. It's like a synonym. And then user collection insert, and you're adding a record, what I would call a record, I think they call them documents in Mongo, into a user collection. Now there is no user collection there, but it will create one for you. So let me know if anybody's stuck with that step, because we won't get too much further if you can't do that. Now, this is just, you could do the same thing 2 more times. You could take this record and do, what they call it, So you could take this command, db user insert, and do it 2 more times. But the article is just showing you that you can, instead of inserting one individual record or document, you can create a list of documents and submit them all at once. So what it does is, it creates something called new stuff, which is, I guess, just a local variable in this utility. And what you have there is JSON containing 2 of those records. A username, test, blah, blah, blah. And then you do the same thing, db user collection dot insert, and then you give it that name and it'll insert those 2 records. And then if you say db user collection find pretty, it should print out 3 records. And when you get that far, then we can go on. You're happy, you're happy, you're happy.
I've done the article listening. I'm done with that.
Huh?
I think I'm done with the article.
Good for you. Okay, you can go home too.
Yeah.
So, is everybody able to print out 3 records with the help? Okay, good.
So to switch, switch contexts, or switch sets of data, how'd you go about doing that?
How would you go to another set of data?
Yeah, I think you.
I presume you would create a different
Collection,
collection, yeah.
and then set the path again, pseudo, path, that one line.
Okay, so now we're done with the BC article, or, you know, that cut and paste off. And we're over here in the very first article, and it's Mongo, Mongo, Mongo. This is what you should see if you do that Mongo pretty command. You should see the 3 records you've added. And now we're going to hook up Mongo to Node. So again, our goal is to first display data out of the database, and to do that, we're going to open up this app.js, which is the first JavaScript that gets run, and we're going to add this, which is basically telling your application, hey, drag in this and drag in this, I require them. And oh, by the way, you're defining a variable called DB. Remember how we use DB? And say, what is DB? Oh, it's this local host, which is where the database server is listening, and that's the name of the database.
Where does that port come from?
It is a default that Mongo installed with.
Yeah. You can change that in www5 and with.
You can change it if you need to. In fact, it says that right here. Why does the mouse jump every time you touch it?
That's the worst.
Okay. So,
You go to the left, and now you just start scrolling down the page for no reason. You add these to that as well. I'm trying to do it in Canvas while they're scrolling back up.
And make sure you don't have a typo in there. Because that's.
That would make sense.
That would be the main thing, 'cause it's not finding the package.
I don't want to work tomorrow.
now, yeah, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, here in this original app JavaScript is where you're defining everything and setting up. You're telling it to, in effect, to create 2 what I would call controllers. And these controllers have to exist. So this thing called roots and this thing called user, where I need my browser here. So if I go to this node test, remember when we created the project, we have a folder that contains routes, here's this overall app that runs first, app.js. And then if we look in routes, we will find, and views. Views is where, what I would call, in the MVC world, it's the view, and that's why it's called a view. This is what this controller is going to spit back. It'll do some processing, set some values into this. In effect, think of those as HTML files, and it'll spit the HTML files back. Okay, so we will edit those to look pretty or do whatever we want. If we go to the routes,
Yeah, it's there.
I think of these as controllers, and this one has two of them. So when a URL comes in, like Bob Slash or Bob Newser, it has to direct to one of those, and you'll set these up to point to one of these controllers. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to add a new one so that we can do our own special processing. So there's those two. If we go to, you want to open up app.js if you haven't already, which is this guy. And what you're going to do is you're going to add this code here. And I don't speak JavaScript, but basically what you're doing is you're saying that this app is bringing into, it's like a using statement in C# as far as I'm concerned, in C#. When you would say, like, using the ADO library or using something else, you're saying, in this app, introduce this function, and this function is going to be basically the connection between our app and our Mongo database. And because we define it there, it's available in both of these routes. And you'll see, maybe, that we will use these variables to read our database and get records out of our database. So if you go back to the article, it says right above those lines to insert that text. And this is what the whole file should look like, but the only changes we made was we added that. So now we want to pull it, okay? So if you look in index, which is a list of our we have get a home page, get a hello world page, and we have, I guess these are more like controllers now that I think about it.
It's pretty weird that it's called index.js.
Huh?
It should be like router.js or something. Well, no, that's older. Right.
And what we're going to do is we're going to add one of these guys so that the router can point to it. So the router can say, if a person comes in and they say, give me /user list, this is what I want you to do. Run this JavaScript function, which is going to get the database. It's going to go get the data out of the database, and it's going to return it, and it's going to render, which means this is where it's going to spit the view back out. It's going to spit a view. It's going to go expect to find a view called userlist.view. And userlist.view will have access to this collection of data that it read.
Now, why are you passing in empty objects on the collection.find? Is that placeholders? You're like boom, boom, and then call this anonymous function to move the anonymous function over.
I don't understand your question.
The empty objects after .find is parameters. Anyway, it's just
Yeah, in Mongo, when we did the find command, it had an empty.
right. So
Argument
I'm guessing it
list.
just brings back everything, and you can put in objects there, and it'll bring back.
Yeah. Sorry, that's too hard a question for me. So we're adding that, and we're grabbing the data out, so it's gonna make an HTTP REST, put the data in there, and then it's available to the view. So in order to make it show up in the view, we gotta create a view, which is called userless J. So what it says to do is open up index.jade. So I'm using this Jenny editor. I would go open, and then I would go to my views, and then it says like open up index, and then just immediately do a save as, just so you create the right file with the right extension, and then do a save as userless J. And then something weird about this mouse.
First thing I do for the project is rip Jade out of this. Completely.
It's the same thing.
Put in regular HTML.
You have two different desktops enabled on that, and sometimes when you scroll too fast with the mouse, it'll flip through the desktops real quick.
Yeah.
And so you think, and they're identical, until you realize that you thought you had something open, but now it's not. It's just because it's on the other desktop.
The other desktop, yeah.
But I figured out how to make it so it doesn't do that by getting rid of the
Getting
second
rid of the
desktop.
other desktop. That would be a good thing to post. Okay, so this is our, call it HTML. And it's this funny Jade version of abbreviated HTML. And it doesn't, it's like it has an opening tag and it has no closing tag, right? So there's an H1, but there's no end to the H1. And whoever invented Jade thinks that's wonderful, because you type less and you ship less characters over the wire, I guess. So anyhow, so we got a heading called user list, which we could change if we wanted. Then we have an unordered list, and then each user is incredibly cryptic for saying, for each user I in user list. Now, what is user list? Well, user list is this variable that's defined over in the controller, so it's accessible to us in the view. And then we're making up a fake email address and plugging in the data there. And then this is, when you see those braces there, that's where it's going to pull a variable out and replace it with that variable. So that creates the view. And if you do both of those things, and then if you haven't already, open up a console, and you have to navigate to where your project is, which in our case is in BC user / what's the name of this silly project?
Notepad one.
Yeah, yeah. You go into that directory, and then you type npm start, and it'll start up. And then you open up a browser at 3000, and if you open it up at 3000, port number 3000, all you get is Express. But because we've added a new route, you can type /userlist, and now the route says, oh, user list, go run that controller. That controller makes a call to Mongo. It says, give me all the data in this record. It brings it back, and then that Jade program goes through its for each loop, and it pulls the values out. Now, I have an extra value because I've already gone further into the project. Is anybody stuck doing this?
Yeah.
Who said yes?
Me.
What happened?
can't find, when I do an npm start, it says I can't find Mongo.
Are we using external layout?
Okay, did you
We're doing
redo
this.
Mongo this time, or did it work the last time?
Replace
No,
this,
we're fine.
this does say extends layout.
Yeah, the first time.
So if you
Okay,
cut
so
and
you have a problem.
Yeah, usually it's Jade.
And Mongo's running though, right? Because you were able to insert
Yeah.
those records in there.
Right.
Okay. So let me ask, who else installed Mongo correctly the first time with the way the article said. Did anybody get it working? You did?